Welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan, and it is an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. Be sure, subscribe to our YouTube channel. I have a favor too. If you could subscribe to the YouTube channel and leave some comments there. It's a little harder. I'm still getting used to the whole environment. I'm realizing that it is an open forum, so where I can more easily curate the comment sections on our other platforms. YouTube is a little harder to curate because anybody and everybody, whether they subscribe or not, are able to comment. So I'm trying to figure out, do I shut all the comments down, or are there other? I'm still learning YouTube. So if you don't mind, could you go to YouTube? We do have videos up there. This is going to be up there. Maybe you're actually watching this, which is cool. But we're still on all of our audio platforms as well, of course. But I'm asking the sane, civil, intelligent people that have been a part of this show so far to go on there, leave some comments. Now, don't put up your dukes and start fighting some of these crazies that are just talking nonsense or whatever. There have been some fun comments. Funny. I don't know. It's folks that are trying to throw some punches, rhetorical punches or whatever. And that's dominated some of the threads that we've put up. Now, the good news is we're getting a bunch of views. Listen, I have just a little more than 250 subscribers on there, which is great, and I'm seeing that number go up every day. And it's really cool seeing a bunch of downloads. The ones we did with Carl last week, Carl Allen last week, got 1,500 views and a bunch of comments, and another solo one I did got a whole bunch of comments. But like I said, most of the comments are being dominated by, guys that are they're not very engaging. Let's put it that way. So I'm asking again, the intelligent, sane, civil, more erudite, more thoughtful, more meaningful people who really want to engage with a spirit of good faith and goodwill. I'm asking you to take over that space so that the screamers, the extremists, I'll just say it, the assholes can be drowned out. They don't deserve to be taking over a whole other space. So that's what I'm asking. All right. Having said that, like I said, we're putting a video up, so go to the YouTube channel, subscribe. We do have links in the show notes if you're still listening on audio. We totally welcome that. This show is made for audio, for you to be a part of the conversation, to feel like you're at the kitchen table with me, and having a conversation. Still follow us, review us, and join our Patreon. It all helps so we can continue to have great conversations and thinking through big, important ideas like the one that's on so many people's minds. Who's going to win this election? So today I got my election 2024 final predictions, battle of the sexes, and trash talk, because that ultimately is what it all comes down to. So I'm just going to dive right in. I thought the best way to go about this is to simply answer some questions that some of my friends have been asking me over the last few days. One interesting subject that's come up is whether there have been any October surprises. Has there been anything that's happened in the campaigns or in the news that's fundamentally changed the course of this election? And, when I first heard a reference to a joke made at Trump's rally last Sunday, I didn't realize how big of an impact it would have. And then ultimately, President Biden said something that perpetuated this theme that I'm referring to as trash talk or the garbage wars or whatever. I really didn't think that it would have that much of an impact. But now that I'm looking at data and listening to analysts that I know and respect, I think there's a really good compare and contrast. So What I've noticed is that for those who don't know what I'm referring to, good. That means you're not extremely online, you have a life, and you're not paying attention to all the weekly headlines. But this story really did break through. So I'll read the summary from the first couple paragraphs of the BBC summary of what happened. The BBC said a comedian at a Donald Trump rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, sparking fury from Republicans and Democrats and accusations of racism. The comic Tony Hinchcliffe was among the speakers at the Madison Square Garden at in New York on Sunday. He also made a series of jokes that leaned in on racist stereotypes. A Trump advisor distanced the former president from the Puerto Rico joke, not the reference to an African American man and watermelon or something, not reference it. It was late, and it wasn't just the speaker, one speaker after another. It it was it was more than just dog whistles. It was bullhorns. I guess it couldn't be dog whistles because they're eating the dogs anyway. So that's what happened. The joke that he said was, "There's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. It's called Puerto Rico." So that immediately sparked outrage from, in particular, as you could imagine, the Puerto Rican community. Now, if you don't know, there are an estimated 500,000 Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico, excuse me, in Pennsylvania. That's significant. In a state that was won by less than 80,000 votes in 2020, when you have a constituency of 500,000, that they're now paying attention, and you get Bad Bunny and J-Lo all of a sudden, saying, if you weren't paying attention before, this is worth paying attention to. This is what one of the campaigns for this nominee to be president of the United States thinks of our home island. So it got a lot of people's attention. And from what I understand, the online uh, not just the online chatter, but the discussion in text threads. There were immediately folks that were picking up on this. Chuck Rocha, for example, sent out a text to every Puerto Rican. I think every Puerto Rican in Pennsylvania. He has he's been on the show with Mike Madrid before, and if you're listening to the folks who are tracking with the information that we can discern, we can see that a number of Puerto Rican voters are late deciders. And for all of the time throughout this entire, eternal campaign to make a joke like that. It's not even a joke. It's just outright cruel. That was an unforced error, to say the least, and it's breaking through. Now, there was also a comment that President Biden made on a Zoom call where apparently he referred to Trump supporters as trash. He was responding to the joke that this comedian made, and he said, "The only trash that I see is Trump supporters," or something along those lines. Now, if you listen to the context, you could think that he was referring specifically to Tony Hinchcliffe. The kinds of people who make jokes like this are trash. But it was picked up by Fox News, by other right-wing outlets, basically to say Biden was calling everyone who supports Trump a trash. That's what the prevailing narrative was. Now, here's the difference, though. Unless you're extremely online, unless you're going to Gateway Pundit every day or listening to Dan Bongino every day, unless you're on Fox News, and that's your only source of information, this kind of content, you haven't heard about this. And frankly, the other difference is if if you're talking about this, if you're posting about this, you're already voting for Trump. This ain't moving any votes, right? So to say Biden made a verbal gaffe and to feign at being aggrieved and they're calling me trash, and then to put up posts on your Facebook page saying I'm proud to be trash, and all these memes that are being posted. These are all people that are, you know, all day every day Fox News, all day every day, Mark Levin, all day every day, whatever else, folks are They're already voting for Donald Trump. But the arguably the the election in Pennsylvania will be decided. We're seeing, the Times Siena poll came out this morning with Harris and Trump tied at 48, I think the number was, which means there's 4 points of wiggle room there, some of which will go to third parties, I'm guessing, but some of which are the late deciders who are going to decide this election. And when you have 500,000 Puerto Ricans and any number of other people that are just now tuning in and paying attention, these are the late deciders that, whether they haven't decided to who to vote for or just haven't decided whether they're voting, the all indications point to the fact that these late deciders are breaking very much in favor of Vice President Harris. So the trash wars, has there been anything that's happened in the campaign or in the news that's fundamentally changed the course of this election? I can't believe I'm saying this, but the trash wars is Biden's gaffe and people thinking that he was referring to all Trump supporters as trash, or whether he was referring to this one individual, Tony Hinchcliffe, as trash. It didn't move. I'm here to tell you it didn't move a vote. However, the Trump rally on the Rhine, it was quite an event. The other thing about that was that it wasn't Trump himself. A lot of people, whatever comes out of Trump's mouth these days, by now we're 9 years in, 9+ years in, it's almost like white noise. People can't hear it. But the fact that there were so many other speakers that were spewing this hateful, bigoted rhetoric, that's specifically why it broke through. That's why it broke through. So who won the trash wars, and did that move any votes? Yeah, I think it did. And when you're talking about a race that's apparently, a lot of indications point to that a state like Pennsylvania and other states are this close, it's having an impact. So another question that's come up quite a bit in the last 24 hours is about the Seltzer poll. Ann Selzer, excuse me, Ann Seltzer is one of the most respected pollsters. She specializes in Iowa. She did a poll with the Des Moines Register. And I'll just read folks have been asking me in the last week. It came out yesterday, Saturday. I'm recording this on a Sunday night. You can tell it's dark in the background here. It's already nighttime, so kind of late coming in with this. So it came out yesterday, Saturday, and I'll just read the summary from the Des Moines Register. They said Kamala Harris now leads Donald Trump in Iowa. I'll say that again. Kamala Harris now leads Donald Trump in Iowa, a startling reversal for Democrats and Republicans who have all but written off the state's presidential contest as a certain Trump victory. A new Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll, that's the Seltzer poll, shows Vice President Harris leading former President Trump 47-44 among likely voters just days before a high-stakes election that appears deadlocked in key battleground states. So what do I think about this? There's a bunch of thoughts that come to mind. One, again, Ann Seltzer is one of the most well-respected pollsters in the country. She specializes in Iowa. She did an Iowa poll, and she has been way more right than wrong. There are a couple of times that she missed something, and that was going back to 2004 when she missed a key portion of a key voting block that came in late on Friday night before Election Day. This is 2004. So she missed that one. But ever since then, she has been remarkably on point, even when other polls around the country, like the presidential polls in 2016 and 2020, were all seemed to be congealing around a certain narrative. The Seltzer poll has given us information and an indication of how the election would ultimately turn out. For folks that were paying attention to her polls in the presidential in 2016 and 2020, there were reasons for Democrats to be concerned. She was showing information that many other, even top-rated pollsters weren't showing. So she has a good track record. She has a very transparent methodology. I do have a few questions about this. As I said, the summary says a new Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll shows Vice President Harris leading former President Trump 47 to 44. So as we've been talking about here, 47 to 44 means there's still 3 plus 6. There's still 9 points of what I've been calling wiggle room. Where's the other 9 points? Now you can read the poll. There's a certain percentage of that is third party, but there are still undecided voters. She did define likely voters. So I want to see where those late breakers are. I also want to see how that's moving so decisively because, back in the spring, this was this was a poll that put Trump up by significant double digits. So what the heck happened? Now, in their more detailed questioning, the issue of abortion came up, and a lot of their interviews with folks that were in this poll. So a law went into effect in Iowa that banned abortion after 6 weeks. So that was very significant. I think that also I'll talk about this in a second, but the split between men and women was significant, as well as what percentage of the voting populace, what percentage of these likely voters is made up of men versus women. Meaning, if it's they have just over 800 people in their poll, likely voters, I should say, in their poll, 1,000 total. And let's just take 1,000 for simplicity's sake. If the if the number of people who ultimately vote out of that 1,000, if there are 550 of them that are women versus 450 that are men, that's a significant difference in women versus men that you have to take into account. And then you start to look at the splits. I'll talk about that in a second. Now, am I convinced that that Kamala Harris will win Iowa just because she's showing 47 to 44 right now? No, I'm not 100% convinced. But even if you take into account the margin of error here, which I think is just over 3%, and Vice President Harris is at the bottom of her margin of error, which would put her at 44, and Trump is at the top of his margin of error, which would put him at 47. It's still Trump at three, Trump leading in Iowa by only 3 points is still really, really good news. I hope I'm not going too far down the rabbit trail in terms of the math right now, but that's still really, really good news for the Harris campaign. He should be leading this state by high single digits at the very least, and even a best case scenario, given the information in this poll, has him only leading by 3. But that's assuming the worst case scenario in the margin of error for Vice President Harris and the best case scenario within the margin of error for President Trump that would put him up 3. So take these numbers for what they are. It's significant. The poll also came back with information about congressional races. There are 4 congressional districts in Iowa. 2 out of the 4 are showing that the Democrats, they're all 4 seats are occupied, are held by Republicans. But now in these races, 2 out of 4 are showing favorability for the Democrats. So that's where it's also significant. It could also, I heard Ann Selzer in an interview today, and she said that could also be pushing Vice President Harris's numbers up. One of those 2, one is, I think she called it lean Democrat, but one of those 2 districts where the Democrat is leading for the congressional seat is significant. So that's another big piece of this election. It's not just about the presidential race. It's race. It's about congressional races and it's about Senate races. So in Iowa, again, I am not 100% convinced that just because of this poll that Vice President Harris is going to win that state. If she does, I mean, it's a whole different election than this narrative that's been written thus far. If Vice President Harris wins Iowa, this is a completely different election. That puts some other states in play, not necessarily states with a ton of electoral votes. Somebody pointed out that Texas's margin, that Trump won Texas by less than he won Iowa in 2020. So again, I'm not convinced that Iowa is going blue or Texas is going blue. But again, Selzer is one of the most well-respected pollsters. She specializes in Iowa. Her her polling firm's methods are transparent. So go to the Des Moines Register, read the story yourself, look at the crosstabs, see how they approached it, see how they arrived. And she could become, this might be the first time in 20 years that she's way off. But I think that more than anything, at the very least, you could take something directionally of what's happening. This poll was just this, and again, it ties into what I was saying before about the trash talk, the garbage wars. Is that this poll was taken after just last week, after the rally, the Trump rally at Madison Square Garden on Sunday. So this is all late accounting for late breaking information. Now, bigger picture, the Selzer poll does give us an insight into another big question a lot of folks have. And that is, what are the key demographics that will determine this election? Now, we've talked to Mike Madrid a couple times this year. We've talked a lot about the direction of Latino votes and how they break down, Latino voters, I should say. But the other one, I just want to keep it simple. The other one, I already tipped my hand that there was a very revealing number in the Selzer poll. And that is men in Iowa, in that poll, prefer Trump to Harris 52 to 38. That's a significant difference. Men in Iowa are leaning or said they're voting for Trump by a margin of 52 to 38. So he's leading Harris. Trump is leading Harris by 14 points. Women in the Iowa poll prefer Harris to Trump by a 56 to 36 margin. So that's 20 points, 14 points versus 20 points. So she's leading women in Iowa, according to this poll, by a more significant margin than Trump is leading Harris in men. So what does that tell me? Again, it's directional. It means that something is breaking late, and we're starting to see information break late in favor of Harris. And if you think about it, number one, we know women vote in larger numbers than men. So I'm not going to get it down into, college educated or certain age groups. I want to try to, I'm already getting into the weeds on the math. So I want to try to keep it as simple as possible. This poll gives us an insight into a bigger picture of what's happening in this election. So we know that women vote by a larger percentage, make up a larger percentage of voters than men. We don't know how much of a difference that will be, but something like women will make up 55% of voters in this election. That's not far-fetched. Even if it's 52 to 48, that there are more women by 52% of the electorate will be made up of women. 52% is conservative. So if you look at that, it's a larger share of the electorate. Women are a larger share of the electorate. And this gives us an indication, the Iowa poll gives us an indication that Harris is winning the larger voting bloc by a larger number, right? So you extrapolate that out, and then we can start to think about the election as a whole. And I'm not going to sit here and go through every single state. I'm not even going to go through every single swing state because I just haven't studied all of the states equally. I've studied Pennsylvania a lot. And I think about the House and the Senate more big picture. So I'm just going to roll out with it. I'm going to tell you how I think it's going to go. This is for the record. I'm going to try to get the video out Monday morning. This is going to go up on all the audios tonight. So I got a timestamp on it, and you can hold me to account. So here's how I think it's going to go. I do think that the House is going to go in Democrats' favor. I don't think it's going to be a huge number, although if Democrats are in play in Iowa, it could be more significant than I think. I think it is going to be in the single digits that they're going to flip the House back to Democrats, that Hakeem Jeffries is going to be the next speaker. That's also significant too. But in the coming weeks and over the next couple of months, we'll talk about the significance of a Democratic-led House. especially as we lead up to January 6th when the election gets certified. So I do think that the House is going to flip. It's going to go into Democrats' favor, but I do think that it's going to be in the low to mid single digits, how many seats they have um, in terms of the majority. Uh, in terms of California 27, man, if George Whitesides hears this, and he sometimes he said he does listen to a couple of these episodes, he's going to kick me next time we see each other for saying this, but I'll believe it when I see it. Y'all know I've had a number of times when I talked about how much I objected to Mike Garcia's votes on January 6th and January 7th of 2021. Um, I'm not as I'm not as sour on Mike Garcia as I was at first. I do think that he's been a part of bipartisan pieces of legislation, but the votes on January 6th, January 7th of 2021 for me were disqualifying. That said, I don't think that George Whitesides is going to, even though he's leading in a number of the polls, and California 27 is at the top of a lot of the lists of seats that can flip. I'm still not sold that that George Whitesides is the guy to flip this seat. I hope I'm wrong, but I do think that there are other seats around the country, especially if we're looking at not just these seats in Orange County, California, and a couple of the seats in New York that will flip from red to blue. But it's a coin flip, but I think Mike Garcia is going to retain his seat in California 27. Again, I hope I'm wrong for democracy's sake. At the state legislature level, I think folks know that there is one Republican in particular that I'm supporting, but that's state and local. That's different. And frankly, if Mike Garcia followed suit with like when he refused to sign on to the amicus brief that came out of Texas in December of 2020, and he decided for not to vote to challenge the electoral results in Pennsylvania and Arizona of the 2020 election. I could see myself supporting Mike Garcia, but like I said, when you vote to upend a fairly held election, a securely held election, to me, it's disqualifying. So that's that. Again, House, I'm saying the Democrats are going to win the House. They're going to flip it from red to blue, but it'll be low to mid single digits in terms of the number of seats that they have in terms of their majority. The Senate, I do believe, is going from blue to red. I don't, West Virginia, as we know, is almost certainly going Republican. Joe Manchin, an independent who caucused with the Democrats, is retiring. That's going Republican. And from what I can see so far, John Tester is not sitting in a good position to win to get reelected for his seat in Montana. There is the one that I talked about a little bit with Carl Allen about whether the independent in Nebraska can win his seat. And not that Nebraska and Iowa are the same, but there are definitely similarities. So if any of the information that we're seeing out of the Selzer poll can be applied to Nebraska, maybe the independent, we don't know where he'll caucus yet, but that might be the one that ends up saving the Democrats if everything else plays out the way it's looking like it's going to play out. Again, Colin Allred, great candidate, has run a great campaign in Texas, the Democrat, but I'm not seeing anything for Ted Cruz that has him polling below 50%, and that's the magic number, 50, 51 consistently for Ted Cruz. So I don't know where the Democrats make that extra seat up. So I think that Senate is going to flip from blue to red, but I do think it's only going to be by one seat. The wild card there is Nebraska, and as well as if the Seltzer poll is indicative of what else is going on around the country, which it may be. Now, finally, for president, the bellwether, well, not the bellwether, that's not exactly the right word, but the biggest key state is the Keystone State, Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania, not only do I think that Kamala Harris is going to win, I think she's going to win more decisively than Biden won Pennsylvania in 2020. I think part of that, again, is because of the late breakers, the independents. The late breakers are all breaking, all signs indicate that they're all breaking in favor of Kamala Harris. And independents are also by about a 10 to 15 point margin are breaking in favor of Kamala Harris. And here's the big one. Mike Madrid has been saying that there's going to be as high as 10% Republican defection in Pennsylvania that ends up voting for Kamala Harris. So again, all signs are leading to Kamala Harris having a good night in Pennsylvania. I believe who wins Pennsylvania will win the election. So yeah, I think that Kamala Harris is going to be the next president of the United States. If what we're seeing right now is any indication, do now, am I going to get so specific as to say she's going to win by how many electoral college votes? I'm not going to get that far. But I think it's going to be somewhere between a very slim win for her, where she wins the blue wall states and wins by the thinnest of margins in the blue wall states, to having basically a landslide. Again, if she somehow pulls out Iowa, then it's a completely different election. And my other theory about a lot of these polls, which one of my very first episodes was called "The Polls Were Right," and I'm a big believer in good polls. Not all polls. We're not talking Trafalgar. We're talking good polls. Times New Siena. The Washington Post puts out good polls. Monmouth puts out good polls. There's so many good A-rated polls, that have transparency in terms of their methodology. But I think the big question is, in terms of what the polls have been showing us and why they're showing a close race. I think the big question is, have they overcorrected and responded to a high level of criticism from what happened in 2016 and 2020? Now, again, I think that a lot of the high-rated polls were right. If you account for a margin of error, if you account for a methodology, so many of the states that ended up winning the election in 2016 for Donald Trump were within the margin of error. So many of the states in 2020, it wasn't as decisive of a night as a lot of folks thought. But again, for the most part, we're well within the margin of error. But I think that a lot of pressure has mounted for polls to correct what they maybe were missing in terms of how they put weight on different parts of the population in different states that they're polling for. And I think that they may be overcorrected. Now, here's the most conspiracy theory esque that you're going to hear me say. I also think that a lot of media companies have an incentive to keep to stack the deck in terms of a good story. And it's a much better story if these guys are, if our the two major candidates are running neck and neck, as opposed to, oh, this thing's a blowout. You don't got nothing to see here. So that's the only conspiracy part of it, that, behind the scenes, there is, there's incentive for media companies to have a good story, as opposed to, yeah, it's another walk in the park kind of a thing. So, but that's neither here nor there. I don't think that's a significant part of it. But I do think a lot of us who follow this stuff closely have been, I haven't really been wringing my hands over it, because at the end of the day, here's what I really wanted to say. My biggest prediction: it's going to be okay. That's my biggest prediction. It's going to be okay. And I'm really, even though I disagree with a lot of Kamala Harris's actual policies, that's what I'm looking. I hope that she wins, despite the fact that 75% of, on a policy by policy basis, I disagree with. But I've had assembly members here in our district in this California state legislature, but we've been part of the conversation together. I talked about Christy Smith when she was in the assembly. Any number of folks. That's what democracy is supposed to be. We're supposed to disagree on a lot and find stuff that we agree on and work it out in, nuanced pieces of legislation. Let's figure it out. But what I can't support is somebody that I know will not concede and will not participate in the peaceful transfer of power. And I spelled it out last time, how I do think that there are very realistic, concrete ways that democracy will take a step back, and that Donald Trump, if he does win another term, will seriously strain some of the basic foundational freedoms that are outlined in the First Amendment of the Constitution, let alone the rest of the Constitution. So that's my call. Thanks for listening. I'm interested in your thoughts. Yeah, again, go to that YouTube channel and leave comments. I really do want to take some space back from these screamers and the extremists and these people who are being uncivil. I want to take some of that space back. Don't let those screamers disincentivize you from leaving an intelligent comment, because I'll engage with you. I'll engage with folks on YouTube, on Facebook, wherever else. But a lot of those other platforms, like I said, are just easier to moderate and to curate so that we can make sure that folks that really do want intelligent, engaging conversation are the ones who are leading it, as opposed to these, I don't know, these guys that just have no interest and no ability, apparently, to make an intelligent, coherent point. So go on there. And I'll just leave it there. As always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow this show, write that review. And like I said, you can watch the conversations on YouTube and support us on Patreon. YouTube.com/politicsandreligion. Again, it's youtube.com/politicsandreligion. And Patreon is the same. Patreon.com. There's no @ before the politics and religion. It's just patreon.com/politicsandreligion. Check them all out. Subscribe. Your support really does make a difference. So thank you for all of it, sincerely. Now go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect. Have a great week.